Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Walker. Great episode, a lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So obviously, Walker's kind of feeling it now, obviously he's been feeling it for a while, but without Mickey around, she wasn't just his partner on the force, she was also his partner off the force, the person he can come to and talk to, kind of like essentially like a best friend. I mean, obviously she is family, so having to kind of figure out that balance both at work and at home, especially because what Mickey did for him, she balanced him out, like having someone have your back, because even Trey and Liam are like, yeah, that gives you kind of make excuses to kind of have dinner. It's kind of like, yeah, you're lonely. So, and he's even going to, Larry, he's going to James and been like, hey, so follow me a new partner. Yeah, he's like, no, I'm working on it. He's like, I've got to find the right partner. Like, for one, he needs someone that symbolizes what Mickey meant to him, because, obviously him and Walker had that conversation about what James wants to do, like how he wants to handle things, how he wants to change things for the better. And Mickey was that person he was looking for to kind of be a symbol, who represented everything he wanted to kind of be moving forward. And he needed to find someone that was perfect for that, but also someone that's perfect for Cordell too. But as his former partner, it's like, I know my old partner will help me find a new partner. So, but quite the tumultuous first meeting for him and his new partner. Because I recognized her immediately. I was like, why does this actress look so familiar? Because I also saw the opening credits. I saw the name Ashley Reyes. I was like, that name seems familiar to me. And then I was like, so the name seems familiar, that actress seems familiar, so that must be the same person. Googled it, and now I know why she's so familiar. American Gods is what I know her best from. I was like, oh my god, right, just saw you in American Gods last year. So I was like, oh, because I'd looked into it. Well, I'd actually gotten obviously I get Google alerts for articles and stuff like that, just because of the nature of what I end up Googling. Sometimes I end up getting recommended articles. So I've gotten recommended articles about his new partner being casted, but I didn't look into it too much because I didn't want to know. So but the moment she popped up in the show, I was like, is it just going to be a one episode thing? Please tell me that's going to be his permanent partner. It does seem like that's the case. I'm like, yeah. Interestingly enough, because I couldn't remember her character's name. I think her character's name on American Gods was Cordella, so it's interesting, her name would be, she'd be partnered with a guy named Cordy, so funny how that works out. But I was like, yeah, especially because how they met. I love that she, the fact is, I thought she was just some citizen. I didn't realize she herself was a ranger as well, but she had a taser on. I was like, oh, she doesn't even have a gun, but Cordell didn't realize that and ended up getting electrocuted. And then she literally kind of took him hostage, being like, okay, you're going to answer me questions. What is this all tied? Are you because this is all about a case revolving someone pretending to be a ranger and basically hijacking people. And I was like, oh, she's some person trying to make a citizen's arrest? What's going on here? I knew she had some personal tie to it. I was like, oh, is this fake ranger tied to someone she cares about? But it's no, she's a ranger. The ranger that's missing, presumed dead, Miles, that's her partner. So quite the rocky start. And I love that she tries to apologize to Cordell. She's like, right, anyone under my circumstances would be, because she's like, oh, he's like, my name is Cordell Walker. She's like, sure, you're the one ranger who everyone knows because his name is in the news. Yeah, of course you're that guy. So but I also love that because she's like, yeah, anyone would make that same assumption. And it's just yeah, you're dressed like a ranger and you're suspicious near a stolen car. And then, which is so sad because Cordell's the one who put out the word, but this was a local, so who probably wasn't well versed. I mean, I'm I guess his name is known, but I guess his face isn't that. That's got to be so bad because I guess he has such a quote unquote generic enough face that's no one's going to recognize you. They know the name, just not the face. It's oh, a fake ranger's of course going to use the most popular ranger's name. Yeah, of course, because his name is in the news all the time. It's oh, it's hard being famous, huh? And I love that the cop just rolled up and was oh yeah, sure, using the most famous. It's okay. And she's like, see, I told you anyone would come to that same conclusion. Just Walker's just so annoyed. And then even James adding fuel to the fire, being yeah, anyone would, yeah, she already apologized, plus anyone would come to that same conclusion. So he's fighting it so much, even though he's trying to meet a new partner, but it's because it's no, she tasered me. It's yeah, but she apologized for it. Yeah, but the potholes is I can't control potholes here. And he's just he just did not like her from the beginning. But to be fair, I think sometimes he gets focused on the good sides of things. Him and Mickey didn't have the best start either. Was it this rocky? No, but it being this rocky made it so great. But even throughout their partnership, even with the good stuff, because she counterbalanced a lot of his issues and stuff that he was dealing with, that she balanced him out. But in the end, at the end of the day, she even through the good parts of the partnership, they still had the rocky road, but it all worked out in the end. But I wondered as like Walker have like blinders on when it comes to like the bad parts and stuff like that, the rocky parts, because I think he only focuses on like, she's family and just, but it's also like, he's spending enough time with Mickey for them to build their bond and partnership. And it's like, oh yeah, and here's someone I don't know who not only like, we didn't start off Rocky just because like we had a disagreement and stuff like that. It's like, no, we started off Rocky because she tased me and put me in a trunk, and everyone's cracking jokes about it. James is and everything, so. But neither one of them wants to partner up. In fact, she's just kind of like, yeah, I can't partner up with someone I don't trust. And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing, because I was like, is it the reason why he's having such a there's such resistance here is because they're so similar, opposites attracts, the same kind of like, they oppose each other essentially. So maybe because they are so similar and stuff like that, which I think as we got throughout the episode, you kind of found out more and more there is similarities between them, is why they butted heads so much. So I thought that was interesting. Her going as far as pretending to be a ranch hand. I guess from the beginning, maybe Liam and Abby could kind of tell like something was a little off about Cassie the moment she introduced herself, being like, oh, I'm a ranch hand. It's like, oh, this is your son. It's like, hey, I would have voted for you. I'm sorry you lost. And it's like, yeah, because that new ADA, you. And it's like, oh, he's like, thanks. And like the moment Liam's like, hope I'll be seeing you around. I'm like, because she is sticking around, isn't she? I hope so. And I was like, it does seem that is the case. But I love the moment she starts asking about Cordell. It's like, oh, what about his last partner? It's like, yeah. She left, but she was like family, and she'll always have a seat at the table type of thing. And I was like, oh, that's beautiful. And it's just like, right. So she's like, oh, I'm not being too nosy. It's like, for a ranch hand, yes, but you're not a ranch hand because you don't know this and that, like stuff that someone from a ranch would know. So it's like, right, my son is looking for a new partner. You're a candidate, aren't you? She's like, you kind of saw right through me. And Liam's just in the kitchen smiling, so I guess he kind of saw through her too. And so I love that when Cordell comes with Jerry, because he's spending the entire time like complaining to Jerry about her, but it's like, yeah, but she's like, do you not see the similarities? She's like, what? You did the same thing to Stan. He's like, I didn't put Stan in the trunk. He's like, yeah, but you held him at gunpoint in the passenger seat. So, yeah, the fact is she was trying to find out what happened to her partner, and she kind of went a little crazy with it, but you did the same thing the moment you found out Stan was related to Emily's death. So, it's like, yeah, just give her a shot, because it's like, there is a lot of common ground between you two. And then them showing up there, and her there, it's like, wait, the place at the table is for her. It's like, can we talk for a second? Yeah. Just like, what, you pretend to be a ranch hand to get, like, what are you doing? And it's just like, I love the back and forth between them. It is definitely going to be a really interesting partnership to see them continue and grow. How they help each other grow as well, not just individually, but how they help each other grow, as well as how they, grow as a team, figure out their name and everything. I thought that was really good. I love, especially because they ended up bouncing off each other and figuring out basically finding out that this whole like carjacking thing was kind of weird. It's like, yeah, why would you like jack the car, leave the keys in the car running, and then just leave it out in the open? Even if it was in the alleyway, you still left it out in the open for someone to find. It's like, because you want someone to find it, because it turns out there's a tracker in it. And it's like, right, the place it goes to get confiscated is where a lot of stuff gets confiscated at. And I didn't know this. I guess that it's just generally known stuff that like a lot of stuff like that gets confiscated and sold. I wonder, where does that money go? Does that money go to the city? Does that go to the police? I'd assume it goes to the city, and then like maybe like the city decides how to distribute that money. Like, is that what happens to the gun programs and stuff? Like, because I know there's like the gun buyback programs and stuff, like you turn in your guns like no questions asked, and it's just like, is that still a thing? I remember in the 90s that being a real like big thing, that like you turn those in, no questions. I don't know if that's really a thing anymore. Like I definitely remember that being something like TV shows would use as a storyline, but I don't know if that's something that's really in like current circulation or not. But I wonder, is it something of that vein? Like, I don't know. At first, when they ran into the guy, I was like, are we going to find out the guy actually is Miles? But I'm like, wouldn't it be too apparent to be out and about in your Ranger uniform if that was the case? That's what I was wondering, because like she was like, oh, it's wondering if it was Miles, but it's like, no, it's the perpetrator. I thought it was interesting that she had like a baton and didn't have a gun. I thought that was interesting, but I thought it's like, oh, because I know Rangers have their actual sidearm and then obviously their personal sidearms, because she had actually walked away from being a Ranger, so I was like, but I'm sure she probably would have a sidearm. But they ended up capturing the guy, and she kind of went hard into paint on him, but luckily Walker stopped. And I like that he was able to kind of fill that role that Mickey had. Like, he was able to be her Mickey in this regard of like, right, telling her like, don't go down this route, like you don't want to do that. Like, he knows what it's like. It even says it later on what it means to chase ghosts. He knows that better than anyone, but you don't ever want to go at it alone. Like, don't do something you're going to regret. Like, think about whether or not this is something Miles would want you to do. So I thought that was fascinating, and he was able to kind of get her to stop. But because she actually talks about like why she has the baton is because that the last time she saw Miles, they were working a case. She kind of got a suspect got the jump on her and took her gun. And the last place Miles was seen, there were 2 shell casings. There was no blood, but it makes her worried. Like, if something happened to Miles, and the fact is, it was my gun that did it. I wonder, is she going to continue doing that, like just keeping a baton, or will she have a gun? I don't know. I thought that was interesting. But like I said, Walker, out of anyone, can understand what it's like when you're kind of driven by this need for answers, trying to get justice, because, Emily was gone and he just wanted justice, wanted revenge. She just wants answers. I mean, that might lead to down a path to revenge. Because sadly, the guy who ended up pretending to be Miles, he only did it because Miles' name was in the public eye as like, oh, presumed dead. Which she already had issues with that because her previous captain is the one who made the decision just to label Miles as presumed dead. It's like, because also she talked about her captain was never too keen on her. The only reason why like she was able to get her position in the first place is because James opened a pathway by letting Mickey, by recommending Mickey and her becoming a Ranger. That opened a pathway for so many people like her. So, but she walked away from everything because she just needed time away. And the reason why she stayed away is because obviously there's just so much, I think, the red tape of it all, and also kind of being somewhere you're not, like, where people don't 100% have your back, because the only person who really, really had her back was her partner. So, like, working under someone who doesn't really have your back is probably not conducive with what she wants to do. She doesn't have, like, the full support she would need. That's why she figured did all this out on her own. And that's why James is offering her the job. It's like, right. He's like, someone like you who can color outside of the line. He's like, yeah, like, I didn't know what I was missing, what I was looking for until I met you. And it's like, the fact is, he's like, you remind me of my old partner. And she's like, is that a good thing? He's like, yeah, trust me, it is. Because despite everything, he is really good at his job. And I think you two would complement each other. It's like, well, how'd you know I'd make the good partner for him? When did you know? It's like the taser. I'm like, I love that that's it. It's like, that will never get old. Because apparently now his family knows. Now, whether August and Stella end up finding out about that, that's going to be a whole other question. But that's just going to be a running joke now about, yeah. And they're also like, oh, yeah, you getting stuffed in the trunk. I'm sure, like, fellow co-workers are still going to bring that up from time to time. Word, it's probably going to pass around the office. We didn't see it this episode, but I'm sure that's going to come up. But I also love that line from Cassie about, right, her and Miles got into a stupid argument, and it is the thing of, you never know when the last time you're going to meet someone, so kind of say what you need to say. God, saying that line just made me say all that you have to say. Just, if you've never heard the song Roger Rabbit by Sleeping with Sirens, it's kind of a perfect, beautiful song that's a representation of that. Like, that's literally a line in, like, the chorus, like, say all that you have to say, essentially. And I was like, just, because that line made me think about that song. I haven't listened to that song in a couple of years now, but it's like, it's such a, like, it's a ridiculously good band regardless anyway, but just, like, that song in particular. Nevertheless, I'm going on a tangent, but she kind of has her regrets about what she wanted to say to Miles, and even I like Cordell being like, right, like, whatever it is I don't know what it is you were to tell Miles, but you can tell me anything at any point in time, always, but she's the one that's like, right, I can tell the way you act around Jerry. It's like, tell her how you feel. He's like, yeah, but it's complicated. And it's like, yeah, but it's always going to be complicated. It's like, sometimes you just have to go to the deep end and just jump. Because he's looking at his ring, and it's like, I think it's just that weird thing of like, right, Emily, because that's always been that complicated thing. It's like, right, Emily was her best friend. Everything with Emily, with Hoyt, it's just, it is complicated. But, as Gary said most recently in Legends of Tomorrow, love is complicated, but it makes it that much more beautiful and worthwhile when able, despite the complications, finding your way forward together. It's beautiful. It's interesting too because obviously Charmed is coming back next week, next Friday in particular, and so it's interesting timing because like obviously like Walker's going to be adjusting to a new partner. Obviously, you were getting spoilers if you're not caught up on Charmed, a new Charmed one. So it's just interesting timing and dynamics. Legends is potentially set up a potential new legend. If we get a season 8, they're going to have to be adjusting to that. So changes all around essentially. So. But I do like that he does talk to Jerry. He's just kind of stammering on his words, but he's just like, right, I've been thinking about you. And about, how, it's like, he's like, I'm tired of waiting, because it's like, he talks about how she's always been there and how that makes him feel. And he's like, oh, how does it, and she's like, yeah, I'm tired of waiting. And just, they do their thing. And she's like, come inside. He's like, oh, inside. And I'm like, oh God, and they start making out. And I'm like, okay, some sexy time fun's about to happen. I'm like, but that's also going to be like, because also I'm sure what's going to happen is like, how do we broach the conversation? His parents and Liam are going to be happy about it, but the question is like, how do you broach that conversation with the kids? Like, I think they understand moving on and like, how him and Jerry feel about each other. She is family already, but so it's going to be complicated, yes. But I think I'm also like, yes, finally, because I've wanted you two to get together for a while now. Obviously, I was scared because I was like, oh, please don't let Jerry be responsible for anything with Emily. And it's like, okay, she didn't. It's like, oh, good. But it's like, yeah, they're cute together. So I'm like, yeah. Because I think at the end of the day, that's what Emily would want him to do either way. But it's always that complicated thing of like, oh, how can you tell what someone really would have wanted? It's like she would have wanted Walker to find a way to move forward in whatever shape or form that looked like. And he has been heading in that direction, found a good way forward, a good stride. So but luckily everything kind of worked out on that front. So that's awesome. Other elements to the episode, we had the complicated, this is going to complicate things between the Walkers and the Davidsons even more. It's the whole, Colton's into Stella, but she doesn't know that, and her and Todd are kind of a thing, which I love that August is kind of like, nah, that's not going to be a thing, it's just a fling, like, Todd's a good guy and everything. It's like, yeah, but it's going to be more than just a fling, because he thinks it's just like, oh, this is like a first guy since Trevor, so, that's all it is, it's just a fling, you just have to wait it out, because he's like, cool, he likes things being the way they are, and he doesn't want to ruin, it's like, oh, things are good with, the band and stuff, and it's like, yeah, I don't know if he kind of feels like this is already going to turn into a little bit of a Beatles thing. But I was kind of scared for a second when they had to go by Todd's place. I was like, oh, please don't tell me you're doing that. But it's like, nah, Todd, good guy Todd. He's like, yeah, I was like, oh, sorry, I lost track of time. I'm with my brother. I don't want him to be a fifth-year repeater like me. And I'm like, oh, that's sweet. It's like even, Stella couldn't help it. She was like, oh, that, so she's willing to help him out just like she helped out Todd. And so Colton, as well as her name's Faye, right? I'm blanking, the girl that August likes. That's kind of part of the crew, because even Colton didn't want to go because he's like, yeah, I'm gonna end up being a fifth wheel. Now he's kind of a third wheel, and it's just like, yeah, now he kind of solidifies, yeah, this isn't just going to be a fling. Maybe he does just wait for things, but it's like, oh, it's just going to complicate things, because, there's a lot of, obviously, baggage between their families, but there was almost like a Romeo and Juliet thing going on there, but it's kind of turned into a complicated love triangle that no one's aware is a love triangle. So that's definitely going to complicate things. I meant to bring it up earlier, but I'm curious, is that what was going on between the thing that she was going to, that Cassie was going to tell Miles? I'm wondering, was it going to be I'm into, that she was into him. Also, I didn't even think about that till now. I feel so stupid. The CM and the CM. They had to have done that on purpose, right? Cordell and Mickey, Miles and Cassie. I didn't even think about that till now. I feel so stupid for not realizing it until just now. It's they had to 100% do that on purpose. Either way, you just kind of feel bummed, because you're but that's always the complicated thing with love triangles sometimes. It's yeah, it's someone you want to lean more towards. You're kind of oh, I want Stella and Colton to get together. Because, once again, much like Cassie and Walker, they had their rocky start, but everything kind of worked out. I mean, hell, even look at August and Colton, being where they are. But then it's also Todd in the first season, you're man, Todd seems like such a douche. But at the same time, it's actually, he's a really sweet guy. He's a good guy, man. Got a good heart, you know? So you're like, man. Especially because Colton wrote that song about, Stella, and will he ever tell her the truth? I don't know. Because the thing is, Todd doesn't know. Like, if Todd knew that song was about Stella, it probably would have changed it. He's like, whoa, I didn't realize that. So, and now they've kind of get more serious, and that's just going to complicate things even more. And it's just like, because no one's bad in this situation. Like, yeah, I'm leaning more towards Stella and Colton, but I'm also like, once again, Todd's a good guy, man. You know, so we'll have to wait and see where things kind of go on that front. Another angle to this episode is the whole situation with Gail, her and Abby running into each other. And I love that whole thing of her being like, yeah, like every time you've always thought you were better than me. Now you got the nerve to talk to me about my dead husband, but that was all in her head. She's like, no, it's fine. I was like, oh, I love that. I thought Gail was really going off on you in public like that, but she buried it. And I think that's kind of a lot of the issues. Like, she's burying a lot of like some of those underlining issues. So she actually runs into Jerry, who was kind of in her group. It was kind of like her finally like, yeah, like the whole Hoyt thing still stands with her, but she's deciding to try and find and move forward in some shape or form. So I think that like, I was wondering whether or not Gail was going to kind of mix in like, oh, how did Hoyt die, and find out like he died on a ranch, and be like, oh yeah, like the Walkers are always at the center of someone you care about getting killed. I thought like that angle was going to get brought up into it, but it didn't. But it was just Jerry helping Gail find a way forward. It's just like, she's like, right. Jerry's like, I had to look at my past to find my way forward, because Gail's like, right, what you were able to do in 1 year is something I haven't managed to do in 20. So, but talking about the past led to her talking to Abby. Like, she's been holding on to stuff for so long, so it's like, fine, I got some questions I need answered. Like, the fact is, like, Marv, he came to you at one point in time, I think it was sometime before he died. What did you guys talk about? And then Abby's like, okay, come in. I'm like, what is this big secret? Because at the same time, Liam and Trey ended up getting some of the deed stuff to the, like, you know, getting an overlay of the land. And the maps are different. The old map that they found shows that the Davidsons own most of that land. What is Walker land is actually theirs. But then the land, like the current city maps and county maps show that it's like the property line is different place. Very, very different place. So the question then becomes like, if depending on which map is true, one is saying that we are actually living on Davidson land and not Walker land. Which part of me wonders, does this have something to do with the conversation with Marv back in the day? Maybe it's a kept secret between the Walkers and the Davidsons that go back further than just even Marv and Abby. I'm curious to find out what that's all about. I figured that whole thing was, that map and everything they found was going to be a bit crux of things, but that's probably going to shift and change a lot of stuff with the Davidsons. I mean, especially because, well, everything we know about Dan, but once again, whether Gail knows about a lot of that shady stuff he's involved in, which I think she does, we'll see. Especially after everything. I mean, his wife now knows the truth about kind of the shady stuff he's up to, so she's going to be keeping an eye on him. So the family's not the copacetic thing it kind of was presented as at the beginning. So we'll see what, you know, we didn't catch up with Denise this episode, so it's going to be interesting to see how she handles all of that. What Gail and Abby ends up talking about, because, like I said, I think it does heavily tie into what Trey and Liam are looking into. So Walker did suggest that they move in together because Liam's trying to, like, wondering whether or not he's going to open up his own private practice now that he has no official job anymore after everything. And Trey's moving out of him and Mickey's place because the lease is up. So Walker suggested they move in together. So will they do that? Not. At the very least, Trey is kind of a nice partner to have in all of this for Liam. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all of this ultimately ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.